Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sort of just waiting for the last few people to come on now. I'll start the presentation. So it's a good afternoon. Welcome to our Maximising Eagle presentation. Thank you for sparing your time joining us. Your host today be myself. I'm Bruce Mills, Director at Eagle Europe, and then we will have Simon Lovejoy and Tony Taylor. Simon Lovejoy is our global senior consultant, and Tony Taylor is project manager and process consultant, both supporting our customers and prospective clients. I'll move on to the agenda. He says, technical glitch. There we go. Today's agenda. Providing I don't have any more technical issues like that, I aim to keep my part as brief as I can. You guys are really attending here to listen to Simon and Tony and what they can talk to you about where we are today with RF Express. Some overview on the solution and some more specific topics, production orders, continuous transaction processor. If you have any questions, please pop them into the questions box in the GoToWebinar bar at the side, or indeed contact us directly. Most of you have our contact details, but I will be putting those up at the end as well. I'm expecting this to last about 45 minutes with some questions at the end, hopefully. I will move on. So, RF Express to today, just sort of briefly. We as a business are staying up to date with current industry trends as best as we can. We are always keeping an eye on IoT, Industry 4.0, and to some extent, I suppose, been around a long time as RFID, those sort of things. And these are very important to Eagle to maintain that. In many ways, we feel by the nature of our solution, data collection, we've been delivering many of these things for many years, 28 years to be precise. Eagle has been out there delivering to customers with QAD. And I suppose the marketing people have, in many ways, rephrased a lot of that and called it IoT Industry 4.0. There are some key areas I'd like to just consider quickly before the guys cover some of this in more detail. We support QAD from version 7.2 upwards, right the way through to QAD 2020 AE AUX, their latest version, on the cloud, if customers choose to go to the cloud. With a number of projects we've currently delivered or ongoing and starting from versions 2018 EE on the cloud, very large project at the moment, going live in July with an automotive client, 2019 EE, finishing off a few projects on that and in the cloud and not on premise, and even starting on a few of the 2020 adaptive ERP solutions out there. And certainly the UX client is available for RF Express as well. We started to embrace Android as soon as it became apparent it was going to be a platform customers needed and wanted in the warehouse and factory floor, and indeed the way industry is moving, it's becoming the prevalent solution, having Microsoft dropping out, deploying 4 scanners, unless you want to put onto a tablet. You pretty much have got one choice going forward, and that's Android currently. Not only are we able to deliver this solution to customers on the latest version of QAD, but we're also delivering to customers who need to deploy new technology in the form of scanners with versions as old as EV2 in the name of future-proofing certainly their factory floor and the way their start capture data, having recently deployed to a site, one of our customers in Hungary, going live on EV2 with the latest version of RF Express Android. This can be massively beneficial to a lot of businesses who can take a lot of the pain out of an upgrade of QAD so that their staff on the floor are already running in an Android environment. This can be done ahead of an upgrade, and by the time they get the upgraded version of iOS, those guys on the shop floor aren't being challenged with a new interface. Finally, the current times we are living in, COVID-19, coronavirus, the pandemic, Eagle has remained agile throughout. Indeed, we've always promoted our ability to work remotely to support, implement, and enhance our customers' use of the Eagle RF Express solution. There are lots of platforms. Some of them become more prevalent than others, Zoom being particularly one of note, enabling us to do now more traditional work at a distance, right through to delivering full projects, investigation, estimate, functional design, through to go live on a global basis, all in a remote form. Enough from me, though. If you have any questions on any of those topics, please, as I said, questions in the question box or contact us direct. I will now hand over to Simon Lovejoy, who will tell you what's new in RF Express.
Thank you, Bruce. Just share my screen for you. Give it to go into slideshow. There we go. So as probably most of you know me, Simon Lovejoy, Senior Consultant at Eagle, have been for some time. I just want to really take you through some of the highlights that we had on our spring newsletter, which I hopefully most of you received. And if you didn't, then please let us know, and we can make sure that you receive future copies of our newsletters going forward. 4 topics that I just really want to go through, and just going to give you a little bit more detail on each of these, but just as headlines to start with. We have the serialized receipt logic, which sort of now enables you with the purchase order receipt program to receive up to 1,000 sublots, which are suffixed to a single receipted lot. And I'll just talk about that in a bit more detail on the next few slides. Then we have the put away logic extension. If you can't find a location to put a pallet away or move a pallet to, then the new pallet move transaction can actually find a defined empty location with the capacity to store those items that are held on that pallet. Introducing Eagle attributes. Well, these will allow you to record any attribute, for example, a grade, color codes, temperatures, and then define an Eagle transaction to record and then capture that attribute, which you can then actually report on later within the QAD. And then we also have the expanded identifier logic. Currently, as you're probably aware, in Eagle we can define prefixes for lots, lot references, locations, and various other fields when you're scanning on a label. And with our new logic, we've expanded this functionality to give you even more options to define prefixes and suffixes, which enable you to have a lot more functionality within some of the more recent industry standards, such as GS1, SSCCs, etc. So let me just go into a bit more detail. The new serialized receipt logic. What we've got here, in the existing POI, you can receipt lot numbers, as you're probably aware, and you can also receipt serial numbers. But obviously, recording many serial numbers at a goods in stage can be a bit laborious if you have to scan or enter lots of serial entries. With the new serialized receipt logic, receiving serials just got, well, I would say a lot easier. So for example, I'm going to bring in a lot number here, number 202000603. And if I'm receiving 999 of these, and I've set a serial flag to indicate that I want to bring these in as a serial item. I can then print the labels and record the transactions, which I can then use further downstream and with the Eagle serialization product to be able to track and trace all of this goods in receipts. Put away logic extension. So I've got a pallet and I just need to know where I'm going to put that away. But I also need to find an empty rack location. With the pallet logic or put away logic extension, I can now define warehouse zones and attach locations to each of those zones. I can also define by item primary zones and, if I want, secondary overflow zones as well. And I can also configure these locations and zones with location types. And I can also define a capacity for each location by pallet number to limit the number of pallets that I can store in each rack space. So when I do my pallet move transaction, it'll actually basically default to whichever of those zones that I can normally put that item away in, and will take me to an empty zone of the right location type if that is required. So that's certainly a lot more functionality in terms of the pallet move transaction. Eagle attributes. Well, as I said, if you need to record an attribute during any process, you can define an Eagle program to prompt for that attribute or a list of attributes if you wish. The entry can be a decimal or a character entry, and you can have a list of acceptable responses. So for instance, if you had a color code and you're allowed to enter green but not yellow, then you can enter the word green and that would be a pass. Anything else would be a fail. Or you could have minimum and maximum values. So if you've got some tolerances on a particular manifold or something, and they're out of tolerance or within tolerance, again, you can set these so that it would pass or fail. And of course, you can make the tests either they're mandatory or not mandatory. And once you've entered those values, they can be recorded then in the appropriate QAD table. And we're going to use the user fields in those tables. So you can record things either in TR hist, into the file. Other it might have, it would validate that the L was found as a valid lot prefix and then read all the digits after that. Well, obviously that's a bit limiting now when you've got things like the GS1 standard, you've got various strings of characters, SSCCs, etc., etc. And what we've done now is...
Simon?
Yeah.
Sorry. Mate, could you go back a couple of slides, please? Because we had a failure on the audio. I'm not sure how many people got affected. So if you can just rewind a couple of slides, that'd be great. And yeah, and just start again if you don't mind, or we just had an audio failure. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Okay, yeah, certainly can do. Yeah, the serialized receipt, for those that didn't get that. Yeah, in existing POR, you can receive lot numbers or serial numbers, but unfortunately, recording serials at goods in can be a bit tiresome if you've got quite a few of them to add in as you record those records. We've got a new serialized receipt logic where you can actually receive up to 1,000 sublots for one lot number. So in other words, as I've got here, I'm receiving, each of these are coming in as a different serial effectively, or lot number. And then that enables me to print a label for each of those. They're automatically generated. So I haven't actually got to type anything in other than just enter the original lot number. Basically then print the labels, and I can follow those items throughout the rest of my process. And this is fully compatible with the Eagle serialization product flow. Hopefully you got that one. Put away logic extension. Again, I've got a palette. I need to find out where I can get an empty location. And with the palette move transactions, I can now define a warehouse zone, zone A, zone B, zone C, whatever. And I can define via gen codes locations that are attached to those particular zones. And then I can define by item which zone an item is its primary zone and which one might be an overflow or a secondary zone. In addition to that, I can also define location capacity by pallet, so I can limit the number of pallets in each rack space. And I can do that with the QAD location capacity field. And also I can define location types. So obviously I've got items that can only be kept in a freezer, which is a primary zone for that particular item. Then I'll only be suggested to put that into that location in an empty zone, and that will appear on the handheld as a default location to put my pallet into. Okay, attributes. If you need to record an attribute, as I said, that could be grade, it could be temperature, it could be anything. You can now prompt for that attribute in a whole, well, any transaction effectively, by defining that via gen codes. And you can enter a decimal or a character entry. You can have a list of acceptable responses. So if it's a character entry, you could put in the word pass or the word fail. Or you can have a range of particular numbers. So again, if I've got a tolerance on something for a washer or whatever it might be, and I'm receiving those in and they're outside tolerance, and I could set a min and max, then I would be posting a fail if it was out of tolerance. And the values are all recorded in the appropriate QAD user field in a particular table. So it could be a TR hist table, it could be a work order routing table, it could be the lot master, and that can be defined. And then obviously you can use QAD browsers or reports then to actually bring that data back and see what products have passed and failed in certain processes. And then the expanded identifier logic. This gives you more functionality than the existing RF values in the RF DID characters. So normally you've got values from 1 to 9, and we've expanded that now to a further, well, up to 35 values you can now define. And in addition to having just the normal prefix, so for instance on a lot number, you could have L followed by the lot number. Typically we would just strip off the L and then the rest would be the lot number. Now we can strip off a prefix and a suffix. So if we had, say for instance, Simon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then Lovejoy, we can define to strip out Simon, strip out Lovejoy, and just be left with the palette reference at the end of that. So it greatly really expands the capability to process GS1 and SSCCs and all other industry standards using this new configuration. So I'm going to hand over to Tony in a second to take you through the Android app. But if you need anything else on any of those topics, please contact me, Bruce, or Tony, and we can send you some documentation on any of those topics. So let me just hand over to Tony.
Hi, Tony. Let me just jump in there. There's a couple of people who contacted me. They had a little technical issue joining, but welcome now. They appear to be on. We will be getting the slides out to everybody, and those who joined late will contact you, and we can talk you through some of the bits you've missed. No problem. Thanks, Tony. You can carry on. Cheers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Tony Taylor, as Bruce just mentioned there, project manager and process consultant. Some of you already know me and have met me, and we've worked together. Hello to everyone else. I'm going to give you a brief rundown on our Android offering. As Bruce said, we like to move with the times, and we have to recognise what are the best available platforms out there for us. And we really have done what we can with Android on the basis that as well as being almost ubiquitous throughout industry now and proven to be a very solid platform, it also gives us some functionality that we knew customers wanted, but that they couldn't have through the Windows or terminal offerings that we've been using successfully for many, many years. A couple of which we'll touch on shortly as we go through this. As Bruce also said, we can go back quite a long way with QAD and Android. Little caveat for that is that certain versions of QAD will require some additional coding on our part to make them Android compatible. Some of the really old stuff like EV2, etc. Not really as big a deal with the newer EE systems, but certainly on the older systems, which obviously massively predate Android themselves, then there's a little bit of work to do, but very little is insurmountable when it comes to stuff like that. For those of you who've deployed Eagle in the past, especially on terminal or window devices, you've probably shared some of the headaches that could be initially had with setting devices up on your Wi-Fi, and then equally with those devices not always being happy in Wi-Fi environments, especially where they consider to have too much Wi-Fi, if there's such a thing. Android removes a lot of that. They are essentially very rugged mobile phones, the devices that we suggest, and as such can handle much more kind of network concatenation and bandwidth issues, etc., and are much more stable when deployed across a shop floor environment. As I said there, we do offer and suggest and prefer certain rugged devices, but essentially this can be installed on any Android device that can access the QAD network. And it's always important to stress that bit, because if we do an Android rollout, you'll usually have someone somewhere within the organization who says, can I just put it on my mobile phone? The reality is probably not, because your mobile phone probably can't see your QAD server. But if it can, then by all means you could. I don't know if you'd want to, but you could. When it comes though to the actual implementation of Android, we've done what we can to simplify the process as much as possible. When our Android APK, the software itself, is installed onto a device, it instantly creates a very small text document called rfexpressandroid.txt for the geeks in there. And essentially what that does is it contains a list of parameters. Not all of them need to be filled in, but the basics are in there of what's the server name, the server ID and password, boring things like what port is it going to use, what size screen is it on, little fundamentals like that. And once that rfexpressandroid.txt file is up to date, we can then copy it across multiple devices, which obviously makes the rollout a little bit quicker. One step further from that is a product we use called Stage Now. That takes a little bit more upfront kind of work to get it to do what we want it to, but that is fundamental in locking down the device if that's part of what you want. Locking down the device can actually, it's an Android device, so it can access the internet, it can access Google Play Store, all those different things. A lot of companies would naturally want to restrict that. If we use the product Stage Now to build the first device and set security protocols, etc., etc., Stage Now will then, in a moment of seconds, roll that whole profile, if you will, out across multiple devices. This means that we're also giving you the knowledge and enabling you to onboard new devices in the future. Quite often, companies would rely on us to configure new devices. Maybe those devices will be sent directly to us before you then took them to use, etc. That's really not needed with Stage Now, and with this use of rfexpressandroid.txt, you have the knowledge, you can build the devices yourself very quickly. You don't need to keep getting us to come back in to help you with that. I'm going to go ahead now and log in. Naturally, I already have my rfexpress Android file set up, so it knows how to get to our server. And because I've already configured it with the server credentials, it jumps straight into opening QAD. You have the same kind of access as you would expect from any of our handhelds, in that we've got the keyboard, we can scan answers to questions. Now we have the benefit of against most Windows devices in that they're all touchscreen. And that you'll see shortly hopefully brings it into its own a little bit. For anyone who's used the system before, you'll see that the menu looks quite atypical to what you've seen before. There's a bit more real estate on the page, so we don't have to be as restrictive on what the menus are called. We can still do it how we used to, and that we would maybe type in the transaction name. But equally, you'll now see that we have a list of buttons on screen, and clicking the button will take you into the menu. So I could still type POR like I could before, or I could press 1 for menu 1, or I can now do it on the touchscreen. I'll do a little PO receipt for you, just to guide you through a couple of the other bits of functionality that we've got. Now you'll see that we've switched to having arrows on the screen. Those are kind of traditional with the Windows, familiar with the Windows and the terminal apps will know that you usually would have FBSE on the screen, which is forward, back, select, or enter. And you had to type one of those entries to be able to move through and navigate. On here now, we've simply got arrows, and we can just click to where we want to be and accept that choice, and it will now allow us to do a receipt. The messages that come up on screen are now kept in little message boxes, as you see, little pop-ups, and that means that we can handle a bit more information in there, and we can do it a bit more neatly. You will, through this process, see 3 different types of pop-up, this being one that is purely informational. So a grey background is purely informational. This starts to touch on what some of our customers want in having something that's more of a visual aid that helps employees see exactly what they're doing. I'll just put some entries in there, let it select a location for me. Nice easy receipt. Oh, receipts. No, now I'm happy to accept this. So you see we've moved into having some more visuals, in that we have a nice little save icon that everyone's familiar with, a little breakdown of what's happening. Just makes it that little bit easier for staff to understand specifically what they're doing at that point. Printer labels are okay, and you'll see there OK transactions come up bright green, so the staff know exactly what they're doing. The alternate to that is that it comes up bright red. When it says bright red, then you're thinking, okay, maybe there's something not quite right, and you've got a bit of a bad feeling about this. It sends you back, lets you do it again. Now, the other beauty of using an Android system versus some of the older systems is that we can roll out updates very quickly. We can quickly send you, you have a problem or you need to change something, we can just send you a new version of the APK across. You dump that straight onto the device, which is by Bluetooth, by data cable, by SD card, by several options, and you've instantly updated your devices and don't have to do any kind of redeployment of what you've got. And then the final thing that we've been working on recently, which ties back into what Bruce was saying about remote working, is that now using this system and having Android embedded in all of our machines means that if we have access to a VPN to your site and we have a copy of your RF Express Android.txt, we can replicate exactly what you're doing. So if you're having issues that are specific to your Android install, we can just dial straight in, take a copy of your Android, start using it, and everything's wonderful. As the other guys have already said, if you've got any questions about that, please feel free to contact any of us later, and I will now hand back over to Simon.
Thanks, Tony. Hopefully my sound is a lot better now. We'll soon find out. Okay, I'm going to briefly take you through production orders. Specifically, first of all, just to say that obviously QAD now have developed production orders, which is an interface what I could say is it's bristling with a sort of bewildering number of new collections, particularly scheduling, planning, and picking, etc. But more importantly, QAD have now just got one interface for a schedule, cumulative, and discrete orders. However, in Eagle, we are just going to maintain the same programs that you are familiar with, but more importantly, that your operators are currently using. By doing it that way, we're making sure that you will have a sort of seamless transition, therefore, to the QAD production orders with Eagle. As you'd expect from Eagle, our transactions still handle the material transfers, including, as I've got here, sort of transfers, container moves, pallet functionality, and picking processes. And obviously in the production activities side, we're still doing the work order issues, work order receipts, repetitive issues, receipts, and labour reporting. So here we have just an example, if you like, of a repetitive order versus a work order in the QAD production order environment. And for those of you with the BDIs, you can see that the order type for a scheduled order is S, and it's a repetitive order. And for a work order, the order type is blank, and the manufacturing type is a work order. And obviously, I can change between the types. I can manage all this on the workbenches as well in the collections. So effectively, QAD now, I don't need all the 18 screens for the repetitive side, and I don't need in old money all of the 16s for the work order. Everything now is in one place. Here are the list of sort of Eagle transactions that support production orders, and you can see that most of those should be familiar with you, whether you're on the repetitive side or you're on the work order side. You'll recognize those transactions, and they're pretty standard, and they're still exactly the same transactions moving forward. So, for example, if I do a BKN against a production order, I will enter this particular Kanban. I'm using a Kanban card here or a production card with the existing Eagle functionality. I can enter the employee ID as I do now, operator 1. I can then enter a Kanban number on my Android screens here, quantity processed, OK to post, and I get a lovely green screen telling me that I've posted everything fine. Now, for the operator, that is completely seamless. I don't need to know whether that's what's going on in production orders for me. All I need to do is use my existing Eagle interface. We've done all the hard work behind the scenes. You don't have to. And the same with the work order receipt. Again, discrete order. Put in my order number. Tells me what it is. Press the OK. I enter each quantity. I can enter a lot number. Enter a location to receive it to. OK to post. Transactions done. So I think sort of the highlight there is that where it really matters on the factory floor, the operators don't need to sort of retrain for the production order environment, certainly as far as Eagle is concerned. You can be up and running seamlessly with us whilst you're understanding and working out in the sort of the office environment exactly what to do with production orders within the QAD collections. We've implemented this across multiple sites in the US. We've deployed in many verticals, as you can see there, industrial and consumer products and automotive. In fact, we've got a go live shortly in the consumer product process in the next couple of weeks, in fact. And again, it's a tried and tested solution. As far as you're concerned, you're carrying on using the same transactions. We just then interface within QAD to give you the right transactions in the right order. Okay, I'll just hand you over then to Bruce to sum up. All right, I'll hand over to Tony first. He's going to take you through the transaction processing.
Yes, thank you very much, Simon. And you probably could have just gone straight to Bruce there. I think everyone else would have preferred it to hearing my voice. Hopefully you've got the slides up on screen now. And yes, I'm going to talk about CTP, which is our continuous transaction processor. Sorry, my slides aren't moving. There we go, that's better. So CTP, continuous transaction processor. It's a fully integrated and automated processing solution for your shop floor processes. We take a message from your shop floor devices, we translate those messages into a language that QAD understands, and then we use that message to perform a QAD transaction. As part of this process, we can also then have customizable labels, etc., and all that good stuff that we're known for. For clarity, before I kind of go on, a shop floor device is any device that is aware of a process being completed and can be made available to your network. So it could be a conveyor, it could be a robot, it could be a palletizer, it could be an automatic arc welder, it could be many, many things. It can even be simple sensors, as long as they're sending some message back to a PCB or to a network location. A variety of transactions are available, a list of which we'll show you shortly. The point of this is that we are overcoming data inaccuracies by removing the operator as much as possible from the actual process of recording the transaction. So we remove the potential for operator errors, and we also get rid of a lot of that manual entry paper. So we're being nice to the environment and to your bank balance at the same time. Where we have, many of you in manufacturing will use multiple operation product structures or complex processes. It's not unusual for downstream processes to be impacted by slow data processing, i.e. you can't move on to the next operation because someone hasn't recorded the previous operation or similar. Usually there's some missing production data that, and pounds that makes it worse. With CTP, those delays are completely removed from the process. As I said earlier, we have fully customizable production labels to go with it. Can be a very comprehensive, customer-specific item label that's got a description, lot number, expiry, any relevant data, delivery address, etc. Or just a simple message for a downstream operator or process to read at some point. One thing that we do is we generate a transaction or a process exactly at the point of action. So it's absolutely as it happens. We're providing true real-time data. As RF Express is already integrated as part of your QAD solution, as it already works at database level, we can completely remove the reliance on middleware solutions or middleware softwares, remove the failures of any of those solutions, and also importantly, remove any potential for costly upgrades or redevelopments in the future as your QAD upgrades. As you can see on the screen there, CTP can communicate in a variety of languages, SOAP, XML, JSON, HTTP, web, email protocols, and several more. As an additional functionality as well to go with that, if it was needed on your particular site, your particular process, those messages can also be used to trigger notification systems, alarms, traffic lights, buzzers, etc., which are very visual and helpful when in a production environment. As we're integrating with shop floor devices, namely, we want to cater to shop floor specific transactions. Some of the headline ones are on screen. Other transactions are available. If you wanted to integrate a transaction that's not presently in the core code set, then we can easily review it for you, see if we can add it in, maybe as a small customization. As you can see, we're covering the most common production, containerization, and inventory transactions, the ones that you would most likely be using in your shop floor environment. I know they're certainly relevant to a lot of my customers. I'm sure the same is true for Simon. We've developed CTP so that its core functionality is controlled by generalized codes within QAD. We try to follow that methodology with as much as possible as what we do, so that allows you as the owners, as the manufacturers, to change as much as possible yourself without necessarily needing more input from us. As I say, the same is absolutely true of CTP. So with a bit of suitable training on the configuration process itself, then you can absolutely manage and change and add devices at will. Yes, of course, we're always there, the other end of a phone or an email to support you if needed, but you should be able to handle this yourself. There are dozens and dozens of configuration parameters for CTP. Some of those headline ones are on the screen now. So we specify the network path of any incoming file, any outgoing file. An important one is the polling interval. This is how often QAD or Eagle will ask the network for an update from that device. So there's no point of checking every 10 minutes if you've got one part coming off the line once a second, and vice versa. There's no point keep hammering your network with requests if you have a very slow moving product. You'll see there's email error notifications. We can use that for anomaly handling. You can email groups, etc., as you would expect. Obviously, we have to specify file formats that are being used, and then important credentials such as QAD logins, passwords, etc. So when asking what data can be handled, there are 180 samples of data in one input file, and a CSV file can handle multiple inputs at the same time. CSV, for most of you, as you'll already be aware, is a comma-separated value file that's already used widely within QAD, is native to Excel, so it can be handled without additional software, and also forms the basis of what are the SIN templates that many of you will be well used to. In this example we've got here, you can see that we're doing a backflush. We've identified the employee, the location, the production line, the item number, the quantity, and what printer to send it to. Those commas there are taking the place of all the information that we don't want to add, those 180 pieces of information that we can have. We can also at that point add in customer specific fields. So if you want some additional data, you want to be able to capture something from a device, you've got a custom user field, then we can add that in, and you can use these devices to report directly to QAD more than just I've completed an operation or produced a widget or however else. So naturally, some people may have concerns about us showing a new process. Would you be a guinea pig, etc., if you got on board? Absolutely not. This is a tried and tested solution, and we've been deploying it to sites across the world for 4 years now. The main reason for starting to shout about it a little bit more now is that guinea pig stage is absolutely well and truly done, and it is now part of the Eagle core code set. So it's ready to go for anyone who is an existing Eagle customer and doesn't represent a further investment beyond setup. I'll kind of finish it off with a case study. Again, as we've said before, if you've got any questions, please feel free to contact any of us. It was quite difficult to narrow down a case study because, as I say, we've used it in multiple verticals and we've got several customers very happy with it at the moment. I've picked this one simply because they gave probably the most direct quote at the end. This is Continental Structural Plastics. They're known as CSP, part of the Teijin Group. They supply body panels to pretty much every major OEM vehicle manufacturer in the world. They've been an Eagle customer since 2006. Across that time, we've naturally improved their processes. We've vastly reduced their data entry times and speeds when compared to doing it natively within QAD. So we have made some great strides for them, but they were still in a position where a part or a pack of parts is available every 45 seconds. The data input still took a further 15 seconds after that. They couldn't be concurrent. They were certainly only one after another. So a 45-second process became a 60-second process. Doesn't sound like a big difference, but it certainly is. What we were able to do with CTP was entirely remove the labour element of that data input and have it triggered by multiple devices across the shop floor. Because of that, we didn't need the machine to stop in any way for that 15-second input. It was all done live and triggered by the machine. So we effectively completely removed that 15 seconds of transaction from this, completely live. All data is exactly as it should be. Now, if you map that out across a 24-hour period, that 15 seconds is actually 6 hours. Most manufacturers would quite happily take an extra 6 hours a day on their day. So it was a huge, huge change to the company. Paid itself back in less than a day as far as the project was concerned. Their own integrations manager said, we now have a focused concentration on producing parts and not having to worry about computer administration. Eagle are just phenomenal. I greatly appreciate all the time and effort they put in on the project. A great tribute to us after a great project. Thank you for listening, and I will now hand back to Bruce.
Thank you, Tony. Just waiting to get my screen back. Right, I think you should see the right screen there. So thank you very much. We're sort of at an end here. Thank you to Simon and Tony for their in-depth overviews there. Clearly an awful lot of information, and as we've sort of said throughout, very happy to discuss in more depth any of the specific topics if you contact us. But I think finally I've got a few questions that have sort of I was prompted to prior to and has come through with a little bit of time left. First one that I'd like to touch on is for Simon, and we go back to the beginning. You were talking about Eagle serialization solutions, Simon. I've been asked if you could just expand on that a little bit further, please.
Yeah, the Eagle serialization module, I think it's been a couple of years now, probably in line with the QAD serialization module. It enables you to, on incoming goods and on outgoing goods, to be able to handle GS1 license plates and SSCC numbers, and also then to add those, or just normal serials lots and pallet references into a multi-structured packaging unit. So you can build up a whole array of, a box has got inside it, it's got a carton that's got inside that another level of packaging, etc., etc. And then you can use the standard Eagle transactions to move those structures around the factory and also to ship them as well, because as part of the process we convert that serialized structure into a master and child container structure within QAD. So in essence, or in a nutshell, that's it. But again, if anyone needs any more information on that, I've got a few bits and pieces you can have with a bit more detail attached. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. And then a second one, which is I'll sort of spread the happiness, so to speak, and get Tony to help us on this one. So it's an Android question, sort of double question. I'll start because I think I can answer the first one. It's do we have any recommended hardware for deploying the latest solutions? And that's a sort of a double question, a double answer as well. Sort of we've traditionally always used what was Intermec, Honeywell, and we used them and deployed a lot of what was the CK3, which was a .NET interface and character. But is now the versions of Honeywell CK65, but they have quite a few Android solutions out there, tablet, PDA kind of solution, as well as what you would recognize still as a CK3. But here in Europe, we've had a huge take up on Zebra technology, which would be the Zebra TC70 series devices, which are again a very rugged telephone PDA type of device, and equally where people are wanting to scan quicker, more complex, and have a more rugged device, it's the TC8000 solution. Now the second half, which is for Tony, You touched on the deployment side of things of the Android solution, sort of both for present and what we've done recently with the sort of older versions of QAD. What sort of time frame does it normally take to deliver a solution of Android against Eagle? I know that varies between new and old, but if you could sort of just give us a view on that.
Yeah, of course. So I suppose Android deployment comes in phases. So the first element is to get on your servers, have a look around, make sure that your present Eagle install and QAD version are Android ready. That can be a very quick thing if it is, a bit longer if it isn't. Naturally, we would look at that before we would provide any quotes. But we found that even the most complex environments can have an update built for them in the matter of a few days by our developers. So not a huge impact on any project, really. It's very rare that we would have that take longer than the actual physical selection of devices and delivery of devices. Once you have devices on site and we're confident that your install is correctly configured, scripting, etc., the initial device configuration, the absolute worst one I've ever had was a device take 4 hours to sort out, and that was because of a very complex Wi-Fi environment. But what we normally do is we have myself or Simon plus our resident Wi-Fi and networks guy work together to overcome those issues. And once that initial device is set up, as I say, if you're using Stage Now, it might take up to a day to build a Stage Now profile, but you could then roll out a significant number of devices very quickly, minutes per device. If you went to the flip of that, where we didn't use Stage Now and we just used the RF Express Android.txt, then it might become 20 minutes per device once that first one's done. So again, it's not a huge thing. If you've got a small number of devices, we just go in and do them all manually. It really isn't a big process. You can have a lot of devices deployed within a day. The only caveat I'll give to that, and I know there are people on the line who've experienced this, and it's not uncommon, even when reminded by us, is that when you get a device, please do charge it, because there's nothing we can do with a flat device. That would be my only thing that really impacts rollout time beyond Wi-Fi issues. But yeah, the short answer, you can get it all done in a day.
Thanks, Tony. Just I didn't hear you say, but I think Stage Now is a specific solution to the Zebra devices.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Tony. Just sort of final close. Thank you again all for attending today. We will provide copies of the slides if you watch out in your emails, and also we'll probably post these on our website when they are ready to come out to you guys. You'll be able to download from a link. There's probably as well, we're going to look at even posting the video recording of this as well, but indeed come back to individuals if you want to book appointment to review any topics covered today. Let us know. Finally, again, thanks Tony and Simon, and I just want to introduce the last name on the page there, Tom Wayne, our new account manager. So if you need to get hold of him for anything, or indeed he contacts you, please take his call, respond to his email. He is there to help and support us all. With that, I say thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and we'll be answering any further questions and some of the ones that I haven't managed to have time to fully cover off today that came through. Goodbye and have a great weekend. Thanks. Bye.